welcome to the next episode of the Appalachian podcast. I'm your host, Billy Riddle. Not with me today is my co-host, Jeff Taylor. Bodine is living it up on a cruise this week somewhere. Not here, I don't know. I'm paying attention a little bit on Facebook, but I couldn't even tell you where they went to. Personally, I don't understand why anybody goes on a cruise in July. It's like the hottest time of the year. But, I would much rather do it like in September, October. But, Bodine has never been accused of being the sharpest tool in the shed by any means. So, it is what it is. So we're going to get by this week's episode without him. And I'm pretty excited about this week's episode. We've alluded to it a few times on here lately, because I know everybody, especially with some of the recent shows we've had, seem to kind of question and ask me a little bit about my political ideology or my, things to that degree. And, it is a libertarian, and the guys we have on here today, we're going to talk a little bit about that. Some of the things I alluded to on an episode, our Shall Not Be Infringed episode with Simon Winch, about how the Libertarian Party's seen a massive shift here in the past couple of months. We're going to talk about that a little bit and kind of just introduce everybody listening to the Libertarian Party, the new face of it. Because if you're anything like me, for the longest time, as Democrat or Republican, you didn't even think third party until Ron Paul kind of came along. And although he was a Republican, I think it started piquing a lot of people's interest just about there really is another avenue that is more centrist, definitely away from the status quo. So we're going to talk about all that and a lot of other things. I'm going to let these guys introduce themselves, starting with Andrew, because he has been on the show before. So just, gentlemen, just introduce yourselves real quick and, kind of just tell us what you do and go from there. Andrew.
Okay, yeah. So I'm Andrew Kimbel. I live in Roanoke. I do some IT for a living. Do some DJ stuff on the side on weekends. I've been been a member of the Libertarian Party for a little over 2 years now. Just renewed my membership. Got involved with the Mises Caucus almost right away. Like basically just as soon as I heard that there even were caucuses, I was just like looking up different things. I joined the Waffle House Caucus, having a little bit of fun. Absolutely. But yeah, definitely a big fan of libertarianism in general. Like as soon as I had even heard about the party, I was like, those are all the things that I already believe. Maybe I'm in the wrong party. So it was an easy decision for me.
Paul.
So my name's Paul Bracco, born and raised up in Northern Virginia, still living up here for now. My intro to libertarianism goes back a bit of ways. Studied some economics at George Mason. Very, very well known in libertarian circles for having a very based economics department. And that reputation is well earned. So I don't know. I guess I kind of had given up on politics for a long time. Other than in high school, I was never really into partisan politics, and that college experience really dissuaded me. But I
think it was designed to do that, to push you in one direction. You just didn't go in the direction that the typical universities want people to go into, though.
Well, that's also, I didn't go to the typical university. So since a lot of listeners are in Virginia, if your child is insisting on going to college and they want to study economics, I can highly recommend George Mason. I kind of gave up on politics, wasn't really into that sort of thing. Was like, if anybody's familiar with the term black-pilled, kind of black-pilled. And then I ran across Mises Caucus talking about decentralization, nullification, local politics. Forget about all that's national stuff. And it sounded great. So I got involved 2019, started doing some organizing here in Virginia. stepped back from that a little bit recently, but
Did he freeze up on us?
come help us decentralize the state.
I think I think I just went out right there. Could y'all hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
It was for a moment there, but yeah, you froze up for just a moment.
Yeah, I think it kind of went awry there for a second. But so Paul, what is your? You might have said this and it cut out on me, but do you have an official position now with the state party or anything?
No, I was the treasurer of the local affiliate up here for a year. That wasn't it wasn't too bad. It was just it's filing reports, it's all the boring stuff. But I don't know. That's basically my job, is messing with spreadsheets and clicking buttons on computers. So whatever.
All right, Matt, what about you?
So I'm Matt. I'm from here in Huntington area, West by God. I'm an electronics engineer as my day job, but the reason why I'm here is because I'm a state organizer for the Mises Caucus for West Virginia, and I'm also one of the Region 5 organizers. Me and another lady, Dee Watson, down in North Carolina, helps me with that. I'm probably a little older than most of you guys, but my origin story was by the time I was graduating high school in 2001, I was pretty buttoned up George Bush neocon, and because that's what my parents were, it's what my grandparents were, and when I always sort of I did it because it's what I was supposed to do, but I really didn't feel it that much. And I would say all the right things and read all the right books and watch Glenn Beck and do all that, but I ended up getting turned on to a book called The Road to Serfdom by F.A. Hayek. I was actually watching one of those Fox News shows, and that sort of started me down the path. I thank Matt Kibbe for that. I thanked him personally for that, and it took a while, but the Ron Paul things ended up happening, and that was great. And then I paid kind of attention to the Libertarian Party, but I always thought they kind of sucked. Yeah. And then I started seeing online this thing called the Mises Caucus, and these guys are saying all the things that I believed in and read all the books that I read, and I decided to join up, and me and Will Hyman and Dustin Blankenship and Taylor Richmond put the team together in West Virginia, and in about a year and a half we had the state party, and then recently we went to Reno and accomplished that mission, and I couldn't be more excited for where things are going party wise.
Yeah, well, I'll take that as a compliment. I'm actually older than you, I believe, based on the year we were graduated. So if I'm rocking a young look like that, I'll take it.
Well, usually in libertarian circles, I'm the oldest dude around. So
well, good. I think we'll make a good combination here, because I'll be 40, and now granted I do have little tiny small babies, so I waited really late in life. So if anybody sees me out, with the hair and the slick back glasses and a good looking wife, I'm not as young as. I've just been blessed. So, I listen to all y'all stories, and a lot of them, especially yours, Matt. It's kind of like mine. And this is why I wanted to do a show on this. And this is why I'm passionate about it. And this is why I want folks that typically don't tune into, episodes to hear this kind of stuff to stick around and just listen to it. Because I think, for one, I've got a pretty good eye for talent. And at least I got a pretty good eye for things that just seem to be working well and right. I mean, I got a wife way out of my league. I've managed to make this podcast successful somehow because I've seen the right people, and that's kind of what brought me on board as well. I was, a gung-ho soldier back during 9/11, and you did all the Bush stuff. And as time passed, and the more I kind of distanced myself from Iraq, the more I started paying attention. I didn't pay attention to anything in Iraq for the first couple of years when I came home. I couldn't tell you, most of these soldiers, they'll be telling you about battles that happened years later, and they stick to it like glue. I quit. I didn't pay attention, and that's about that time I started seeing, my brother started getting deployed. He was going to Afghanistan. That's when I really started taking more of an interest back into it, and just started paying attention and looking back at all the things that had happened. I was like, none of this stuff makes any sense. And then, Obama comes in, he doesn't do anything different. He's still droning people and bombing them and invading countries. It's just not on the same scale. And I kind of watched the Ron Paul thing happen. I said, man, these guys are saying the right kind of stuff. And I kind of got a little excited about that and thought, well, maybe there is a little bit of hope out there. And that was quickly squashed by the mainstream media. And, fast forward a few years and I kind of start, getting back into politics a little bit and start listening. I actually was listening to Owen Benjamin. If any of y'all recall him, he kind of went off the deep end years back, but he was just really based, homestead, and talked a lot about stuff like that and kind of conspiratorial. So it made it fun. And he just talked about this guy, Dave Smith, all the time, Dave Smith. And it's, he said, man, they'll call him a white supremacist and he's a Jewish guy. It's like, it makes no sense at all. And they kept talking. So finally, I'm going to give this guy's show a listen. And I started listening. And the more and more, he started talking, the more and more it all made sense. And he was talking about this Mises caucus. And that didn't make sense to me because your average American, you got the Democrats, the Republicans, and everything else. Well, libertarians, have slowly started creeping into folks' mind, but you would think Libertarian Party, you wouldn't think Mises caucus that it got that simplified. And I just started paying more attention, started following the groups, and started realizing, as you said, Matt, that they're saying all the right things that need to be said about individualism, proper freedoms, and everything in between. The things that I want to say, now they have a platform, and that's the one silver lining, I think, of the past couple of years of all this COVID nonsense and lockdowns, is it has given those people in the Libertarian Party, specifically the Mises guys, much more of a platform, because the Joe Rogans in the world and the Tim Pools of the world have started sending a lot of listeners and a lot of people to paying attention to Mises, and the messaging is out there now. So I really believed in it and got behind it, and it's something I never, ever do. So I want people to pay attention and kind of understand that this is catching fire, and it's the wagon you really want to jump on. So I guess what we'll kind of talk about first is kind of what led the way here. So like I said, the Ron Paul revolution, I guess is what people would say, took place around 2008, 2012, and everything kind of went stagnant for a bit. And then the Mises crowd pops back up. And when it comes to Appalachia, I think that they speak, which is really odd, because, some of these guys that are speaking, they're economists living down in Georgia and Florida, or, Dave Smith lives in New York, Scott Horton lives out in Texas, but they're all speaking the kind of language that your average everyday Appalachian wants to hear. And I think Appalachia, and you boys can kind of probably speak to this a little bit, but we have a unique ability to kind of rise above the bullshit. You take the moonshine back in the 1930s, prohibition, us working the mobs and the DEA, or not the DEA, they didn't exist, but the law at the time, ABC agents, whatever they were, kind of stood up to all them. You got Briar Mountain and the coal mine wars. They stood up to the corporations. Even, what was it, Athens, Tennessee, where those veterans went and took back over the town and kicked out all the politicians. Appalachia's got a streak in them. And I think it's super important to try and bridge those gaps here today. And I guess that's a lot of the part of what you gentlemen are doing.
Yeah, for sure. So libertarianism as a philosophy goes back a long way. It's been pretty well established for quite a while. If anybody's looking for anything, look for, what's the one thing to read to get an intro to libertarianism, I would say Anatomy of the State. Website called Mises.org has a free PDF. It's maybe it'll take you an hour and a half. And
there's a free audiobook on Spotify for it too. It's about an hour long.
Yeah. So great little intro, but the philosophy is the easy part. What is really difficult, and to this point has for the most part been, I guess, not really effective at all, is the strategy of how do you take these ideas of individual liberty and self-ownership and implement them in the real world. So that's sort of where the Mises Caucus became very attractive to me. The ideas of the caucus are very strategic. They're not so much like philosophical. It is that you're never going to take over and you're never going to reform Washington, D.C. It's not going to happen. There's too much entrenched power. And there's too much money. It's like,
I mean, it's a swamp that Donald Trump referred to.
Oh, yeah. Like, who took over who there? It wasn't Trump taking over the swamp. The swamp took over Trump.
And they chewed him up and chewed him up. Absolutely.
And like, there ain't a person on the planet who's going to be able to do that. So now what? And that was always the thing, was now what? And it's like, I don't know. But these guys come along and local government, you take that over and you nullify. So basically the idea is your police force doesn't have to do anything. This is like, there's Supreme Court precedent. If you want to get real into it, it's called anti-commandeering doctrine. It basically says that the federal government can pass whatever laws they want, but there's no requirement for the state or local entities to do any sort of enforcement on their behalf. So you can have them pass all the gun laws that they want. And if all the state troopers and all the local sheriffs, they just said, we don't care. We're not arresting anyone. I mean, yeah, they can send in the ATF agents, of which there's like 5,000 and like 3,000 of them are behind a desk. The numbers and the resources aren't there. So it's sort of reframing like what the laws are. And when they don't have a credible threat, a credible like door kicker to come get you, how much does it really matter? How much does it then become just some guy with a bad idea?
That makes perfect sense. And I think for me, again, it's the messaging. And I think what people like to do, especially critics, and God knows the internet is full of them, what they like to do is just pick things apart, very surface level. Now, when I look at, say, the last 4 years or the last 2 years and the 2 years coming up, if I think about somebody like a Dave Smith or a Spike Cohen getting on a Libertarian Party ticket and running for president, they're not going to beat the machine, not this time. But what they do is they start putting those, just by having that spotlight, and if they could just, whether they get a debate or whether they get on the Twitter, or whether they have things that trend, we have different ways of reaching massive audience. It's not whether about winning or losing those big elections right now. It's about putting those ideas in the minds of the people that are paying attention. Make those people that are on the right and the left that are stereotypically on the right or the left, but always kind of questioning the status quo, start making them ask more and more of these questions that they might have not thought about asking. And the transition will happen on its own, because they'll start asking, well, why do we have these issues with police, or why do we have these issues with the Federal Reserve or things like this? And the more they start questioning it, the more they'll come to the realization that, well, both of these sides have been screwing us over for the last 100 years. And you get to the point to where you start focusing in on individualism. And I think that's where it goes to. It's about reaching people and making them question things and getting that message out there. And getting that message out there culturally is something that libertarians now have, correct? I mean, we have outlets. We've got Tim Pool's, we've got Joe Rogan's, Michael Malice, Dave Smith, reaching hundreds of millions of people every single month, with little tidbits here and there that are getting people more and more interested.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the things that that really got me interested. Is a buddy of mine had sent me a link to Joe Jorgensen's campaign page back in 2020, and there was a statement on there that said that she wanted to abolish the ATF, and so that got me thinking. If Republicans are so pro Second Amendment, like of all the times that they've had a majority of Congress and the presidency and everything, like why do we have the ATF? Why do we have the NFA? Like, why do these things exist if we're actually pro Second Amendment?
Well, then you start figuring out that they're not really pro Second Amendment, not the ones in office anymore.
Yeah, and that's another thing is like when you talk to people about Republicans and Democrats and stuff, like you really have to draw a line between elected officials in Congress and your average voter, because I mean, like I think that your average voter, Republicans and Democrats have a lot more in common than they do with anybody in Congress, and then likewise, both the Republicans and Democrats in Congress have a lot more in common, with each other than than what they make it out to be. It's like the WWE. They get out there and they'll fight on TV, but then behind closed doors, I mean, they're all buddy best friends.
Oh man, they're counting their $100 bills and they're drinking brandy and smoking cigars and laughing all the way to the bank.
Yep.
Overwhelming majority. And there's a couple. I think we've touched on it before. Thomas Massey is a phenomenal congressperson to have, and
yep.
For what she does as far as calling votes to the floor and whatnot. Marjorie Taylor Greene is she's a lot better than people give her credit for. And we had Justin Amash there for a minute, but he's still a good voice for the Libertarian Party, and we talk about that messaging, and just I don't like to beat a dead horse, but just to paint a picture for a lot of our listeners that might not be, in the mix of things, the past few years especially has been a key opportunity to jump on board. And if you paid any kind of attention to Twitter or Facebook or anything through politics, you probably didn't see anything groundbreaking from the Libertarian Party. The people that were in charge, their messaging was so milquetoast and bland and lame. And, we'd be in the middle of a lockdown, the most important time in our history, for us to have been alive, some of the most harshest government restrictions, and their Twitter will have some taxation as that. I mean, it's just so redundant. And at the time you should be bombarding, you should be like the Libertarian Party Twitter page should have been like Spike Cohen on steroids and cocaine day after day after day after day. They should have had somebody in there rotating every few hours, just lambasted. But, they failed so miserably on so many levels. This last election was a great opportunity to really put a face on the Libertarian Party. And, talk about Jorgensen. I don't know much about her. I voted for her simply because, but I wasn't very impressed. I don't know. They just didn't get out there and grab this election by the balls like I thought they
I think her issue. So like, Joe Jorgensen has great ideas. I just don't think she was very good at expressing them. Because like her day job, she works at a university, like, and when you're teaching, especially at that level, like you don't have to entertain and have like your students, you're like you have a captive audience. They're not really doing anything. They can't just get up and leave. I mean, they can get up and leave, but then, they're going to miss out on things, and, their grade reflects that. Whereas somebody like Dave Smith, for instance, he's a stand-up comedian. Like, if he's not being entertaining and keeping people's attention, like, and they get up and leave, like, that's his livelihood. Like, so he needs to be a good speaker, to motivate people, to get their attention, to make them laugh. And I think that's probably one of the downsides of Joe Jorgensen. Like, yeah, she had good ideas. She just wasn't very good at expressing them, which was a stark contrast to Spike Cohen. Because like I saw him speak back in Richmond in 2020. We were out collecting signatures, and he had showed up. There was it's like a gun rights rally in Richmond, and I got to hear him speak in person. And yeah, I mean, he really impressed me. Like I felt like my vote for him, well, like my vote for Joe Jorgensen was really more of a vote for Spike Cohen. But yeah.
And I think I think Spike kind of gets a bad rap because of that campaign, because I think he was sort of put in a situation to say things that
he otherwise would.
Yeah, like the old guard of the LP, the anti-racist and all that nonsense wing of the LP that's trying to go hard left, kind of took that campaign over, and it kind of put him in a bad spot, I think. And I think there's a lot of resentment towards him because of that. So I hope he's able to dig himself out of that with like the hardcore Mises people. Now, I mean, he's never going to overtake Dave Smith, I don't think, but I think he could be a worthy successor. But he's got some fences to mend there, I think.
And I mean, that's a valid point for anybody that are in the circles. If you're not, you know, and me, I never really found myself holding that against Spike, because as far as I know, when the Libertarian Party nominates our president and vice president, the president nominee doesn't necessarily pick the vice president, correct? Like, he's nominated separately, right? So,
yeah.
I never really looked at them as a combined pair. I really had some hopes for Jo Jorgensen because she liked drinking whiskey. She was a hockey player. She had a lot of good things to say. She was intelligent. I'm kind of like you. I think the people around her, I think she had a subpar team. And that's clear by, the simple fact that they did not take advantage of the opportunities they had to bring some things into question. So I'm with y'all on that one. I think she's a lot better than her team allowed her to be. And I certainly think Spike Cohen is one of the best, even after all that, in my personal opinion, one of the best ambassadors to libertarianism. I mean, he's out there doing the work every single day. If you follow him on Facebook, he is constantly calling out the biggest agencies in the country and getting thousands of likes, follows and replies, and people are talking about these things. He's bringing attention to all the atrocities that are going on around this country on a daily basis. He's a phenomenal, I consider him a philosopher. I mean, I think he's incredibly talented. I'd love to sit down and have a conversation with him and have a beer, if that means anything.
Oh yeah, like I'll be scrolling through Facebook in the morning, and some post from like the ATF will show up on my feed, and I'm like, I'm not following the ATF. What's going on? And then up at the top, it's like, oh, Spike Cohen commented, and then there's like 10 times as many reactions to his comment as the original post, and it's amazing. Like, he lives to bully federal agencies, and I'm here for it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Paul, your thoughts?
Well, I think that Dave Smith has probably summed it up pretty well. So I'm going to steal his line on it. Jo Jorgensen had been the vice presidential candidate of the LP back in 1996. And in 2020, she ran her 1996 campaign again.
Yeah.
It was pretty much that.
Yeah.
It was probably pretty good for 1996. But the world's got a whole hell of a lot more crazy since then.
Oh, tenfold. It's and if you paid attention, like a lot of us, to the circles, and you have your Facebook pages and the Twitter pages, and you see all the infighting that's been taking place, and I guess to lead up to this, we start talking about the former Libertarian Party and what is now the Libertarian Party. And I'm talking what is now as recent as a month or two, because we're going to talk about the Reno reset here and what that all meant. So this is not your grandpa's Libertarian Party anymore. Due to all the ineffectiveness of the Libertarian Party that we were kind of alluding to with the Jo Jorgensen campaign, and the people who were kind of in charge previously, and your Gary Johnsons of the world, that has motivated a ton of people. Everybody here that's on this show today, and the folks who've been speaking about Michael Heiss, we'll get into him too. He's the guy that started it all. It really lit a fire for people to finally start understanding that, look, if you really want freedom and individualism and individual freedom in this country, you're not getting it through any of the major parties, and you're certainly not getting it through the Libertarian Party, because they're about as effective as the NRA is. You know what I mean? They have pretty much been, no, don't stop, instead of pushing back as hard as they possibly can. So I guess, what year did Michael Heiss start the Mises Caucus? It was in 2016, correct?
I think it was 2017.
2017.
But
did any of y'all here know him on a personal level that kind of speak?
Yeah, a bit.
To his reason and everything a little bit better than maybe I could?
Yeah, probably Matt as well. So I've heard him say that his main motivation for starting the caucus initially was to keep a guy named Bill Weld from becoming the 2020 presidential candidate. So Bill Weld was the vice presidential candidate back in 2016, former Republican governor of a blue state, pro-war, anti-gun Republican, like Atlantic Council, all that stuff, basically like the worst possible Republican you can think of. Mitt Romney. He was basically Mitt Romney.
Mitt Romney light.
Yeah. Like a worse Mitt Romney, if there's such a thing.
Well, light beer is worse than regular beer. So when you say Mitt Romney light, he's definitely, definitely. So, because you're at that point in time, you're a grifter too.
So that was the main motivation, and that, I think, got pretty squashed, and I don't think anybody was thinking that way in 2020 when we actually were rolling in with some numbers, and Bill Weld was out doing a terrible job trying to campaign against Donald Trump back in the Republican Party, where he belongs. But yeah, it kind of morphed into, all right, we got to take these ideas of like making the Libertarian Party libertarian again. And sort of what that involves is messaging. That's the big thing. And that's the thing that you definitely would have seen change if you were looking in about 6 weeks ago, I think. So go, if you're into Twitter, I believe it's LP National. If you want to see some real Twitter fireworks, they're doing it right now. But the
comment sections are great. I mean, if you like to be entertained and you want, intellectual entertainment, follow them. Definitely.
But I don't know. I'm not a big social media guy to begin with, so maybe I'll let other people speak to that. But there are a couple of other sort of implementation parts besides just talking about the ideas. That was just what I was kind of getting into earlier. But I don't know. What do you guys think about the new social media for the LP?
Oh yeah, there's definitely been a drastic, visible change, especially on Twitter. So like I don't do politics very much on Facebook. I try to keep that just like family and friends kind of thing. Twitter is definitely my political soapbox. So I haven't gotten a follow from the national account yet. I've been seeing people posting. They're like, "Oh, the national party followed me." No, the quality of their messages, their tweets and stuff has definitely improved tenfold, hundredfold. It's been insane. Like I find myself actually liking and retweeting what the national party is saying. It's not like just like milquetoast average, redundant, taxation is theft. Everybody says taxation is theft, but tell me something about current
what's going
events.
On today.
Give me, yeah, exactly.
You're hitting what's going on today.
Yes. which I definitely appreciate.
Yeah, I've been a huge fan. And for everybody that is kind of curious, so Mises Caucus, it's named after Ludwig von Mises, who was an economist, and he came up around the World War One era. I think he was a World War One veteran, correct? Maybe of not the United States, but
Mises was in his heyday in the early part of the 1900s. He was from Austria, and that's not necessarily where the Austrian school isn't named after him. There were people that came before him, but he is probably the most well known of the Austrian economists. His one of his students was F.A. Hayek that I mentioned before. He has the big battle later on with John Maynard Keynes, and that's where a lot of people get introduced to these ideas through that rap battle, epic rap battles of history. It's Keynes versus Hayek.
Oh man,
yeah.
I remember those. Those were great.
Yeah, but yeah, Mises is probably the foundation. Like his books, especially Human Action, that's probably his most well-known work, is probably the foundation for mainline American libertarian economic thinking. And everybody should go read it.
Oh, it's phenomenal.
That one's a little bit tougher of a read, though.
I mean, it is, but I mean, all of Mises is really, because he, it's been translated from Austrian, and you're talking about somebody that's writing from, 80 to 100 years ago. Yeah, it's going to be different.
I think one of the easier reads that I've been going through recently is Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt.
Yep.
Which you can actually get for free from the Mises Institute as well. Even Human Action, I think you can get a PDF for free because I've got that downloaded.
Yeah, it's I mean, if you pay attention and you get out there, there's so much information to be had. You can find most of it for free or a couple of dollars here and there, things that will really open your eyes and allow you to start questioning things. And we get back to kind of where this whole started. So Michael Heiss starts this thing in 2017. And what kind of got me going was seeing the cultural shift. And I see all of a sudden all these people start talking about, the Mises Caucus. And I don't know how he did it. And maybe one day we'll be able to get him on the show and kind of allude, or maybe he can kind of go into more detail about how it happened. But, he gets somebody like Dave Smith, who's a huge comic, who has a huge podcast, Legion of Skanks, aside from this Part of the Problem podcast. It's one of the, I guess, top comedy podcasts on Apple. Legion of Skanks is one of the top 2 or 3, as far as I know. So you get somebody like that, and you get great economists like, Tom Woods, an anti-war guy like Scott Horton. Then you start pulling in, the Eric Julys of the world, the Maj Tourés, the Phil Abontes, and the Tim Pools, and it just starts growing and growing and growing. And next thing you know, we find ourselves, the Mises Caucus, in a position to where now they have an opportunity to really make headway in the Libertarian Party. So leading up to this, this past couple of months, Libertarian Party had a completely different look to themselves. And after this 4 years of really hard work by Michael Heiss and all these people, you gentlemen went out to Reno about a month and a half ago. And I don't think people can really appreciate, because we've got so much else going on in this country right now. I don't think a lot of people can appreciate what was accomplished. So you guys go out to Reno, and essentially the Mises Caucus takes over the entire Libertarian Party. So y'all kind of walk us through Reno and how that whole process went, and the transition to make people realize the gravity of this,
So I think we came in maybe about 60%, roughly, a little bit, maybe 62. of the room, which, I mean, that's really strong. There was a whole bunch of like backroom deals kind of stuff going on without getting too much into the mechanics of how the Libertarian National Committee is formed. There's a couple of different states you can group up, and you can form what's called regions, and then you get a rep, which is basically a voting seat. And there was people who were like trying to manipulate the regions and counter moves and all this stuff. It was kind of crazy, but we get through that.
For everybody listening, sorry to interrupt you, Paul. We're talking about the Libertarian Party National Convention. So, you have the DNC, the RNC every year. This is for the Libertarians. So all these gentlemen here today flew out to Reno for this. So continue on. I just wanted the folks to understand what was going on in Reno.
Yeah. So we're out there dealing with this political maneuvering, just like you would expect to see elsewhere. And what we end up getting is honestly a better result than we really expected. There were probably a little bit more of an expectation that we were going to miss a couple of these seats. But as it turned out, we actually got 17 for 17. So that every single voting member of the entire Libertarian National Committee is a Mises Caucus endorsed candidate. So this is not just we got a few people on here. It is the whole thing, top to bottom.
Yeah, and even going back to like early 2021 when I got started, and these, Paul had started way before me. This is a culmination of a whole ton of work by a whole lot of people in every state across the country. You've got people, you're working spreadsheets, you're picking up the phone and you're calling people, trying to get them to come out to county and state conventions. And then that's where your delegates for the national convention are selected, or state conventions. And then you're trying to get, 1,100 people from across the country to one of the hardest places on the planet to get to, Reno, Nevada. Yeah. And I'm almost positive that was by design. And then we get there and first day, and it's all, nonsense parliamentary procedure that, like, they show you that stuff at the Libertarian Party convention, but they don't show you the nuts and bolts of it whenever the Republicans or Democrats are on TV, because it looks like nonsense. The highlights.
Yeah, it's right. They show the highlights, the flash.
So they show all of our, parliamentary wrangling and stuff like that, and it makes us look like we're insane. But we try to maneuver to replace the sitting chair as the convention chair. Whitney Bilyeu, she's out of Texas, and she absolutely hates our guts. She was just ignoring points of order and motions being made, and that failed. So we were all kind of nervous about that. And then we come back from lunch and we're all sort of like, do we have this thing or do we not have this thing? And then I forget what the vote was that we took right after lunch, and it passed with like 70%.
It was to adopt
the new agenda.
Yeah, it was the agenda.
The new agenda. And then whenever that one passed, and it passed probably 70 or 80% of the room, it was just like,
oh, I think it was close to that. It wasn't like counting down to 2 or 3 people, but it was pretty close. Just for context, that needs 2/3 to pass.
Yeah.
In that situation.
But once that was over, I think we all pretty much knew at that point that we were going to have a pretty good weekend. And then it was a party from there on out. Like I said, 17 for 17 on officer elections. And then we got most of the platform changes that we wanted. We took the abortion plank out. The National Party doesn't have an official position on abortion anymore. We took the woke language out of the platform. And that's going to make it, at least for states like I'm in, like in West Virginia, it's going to make it a lot easier for these Liberty Republicans like Mike Isla and Pat McGeehan and Marshall Wilson that align with us on most things, it's going to be easier to get them in now, because they won't be able to say, well, you guys are pushing abortion and I just can't do that. Well, no, we're not. We don't have a position on it. So all in all, after all this work and getting there and winning that vote, it was, I don't know, it was like a sneeze, I guess. You feel much better. You have the anticipation, then you sneeze and you feel better. That's pretty much the way it was.
Andrew, what were your thoughts on Reno? You were there. I was trying to pay attention to you and your 100 selfies with every notable individual that was there. I was a little jealous.
Oh yeah, I got really into my selfie game. So we started business on Friday. It took I think we were just doing credentialing for like 2 hours. So with the convention, there's this big process of selecting like who is even able to vote. And you typically do that at individual state conventions. So what you have is you have delegates and you have alternates, and the delegates are the ones who actually get to vote. And each state selects however many delegates that they've been allotted based on a few different factors. And then you have some alternates in case your delegates can't make it. So for instance, for Virginia, we had 39 slots. And Paul, I'm sure you probably have the numbers of how many people we actually had show up, but we did not fill all 39 slots.
37. It was close.
It was 37, and that was delegates and seated alternates. Because so several of all of the alternates that came out to Reno actually ended up becoming delegates because not all the delegates showed up. So when they first started credentialing, the reports that they had given were how many delegates had showed up. That did not count how many seated alternates we had. And so that was one of the things that we spent like 2 hours arguing about is, well, how many alternates do we have? Like how many people in the room can vote? That took us a while to figure out. But yeah, so then I believe it was that evening was when we picked our region reps. We had like 100 people like packed into this tiny room.
Yeah, a room for about 30 people.
Yeah, like it was there were some chairs in there, but less than half the people in the room were sitting in a chair. You could taste the sweat in the air. It was very hot. Like we were all uncomfortable. But we did get our rep and alternate elected for the LNC there.
Rep from Virginia, by the way.
Yes, our rep from Virginia. The other Andrew. We're gonna start an Andrew caucus here eventually. But yeah, so then Friday evening we had this Mises Bash. Lot of great speakers, like all the big names. You had Scott Horton that was like introducing everybody. Angela McCardle was a speaker. I think Tom Woods. Did Tom speak that night?
Well, real quick, I don't think we mentioned Angela McCardle. Angela McCardle is now the chair.
We were going to get to her.
She is now the chair of the National Libertarian Party.
Yes. We had Maj spoke. Zuby was there. Zuby spoke. And then the headliner, the last person of the night to get up and speak was Dr. Ron Paul himself. I was not lucky enough to get a selfie with him, which is completely understandable. I mean, the man's like, what, 80? Like he very quickly made it out the exit. So not very many people had a chance to talk to him, but not upset at all. It's very understandable. But yeah, so after everything was done was when I started getting selfies with everybody. So I got a selfie with Zuby, got a selfie with Maj, Natalie Denelishin, who's with the Mises Institute. I think later that night I got a selfie with Dave. The next day I got a selfie with, that night I got a selfie with Heiss. I got selfies with like Josh Smith, who is now the vice chair, Scott Horton. Like I was just trying to meet as many people as possible.
Yeah, I was super jealous. I mean, all the who's who of the Meacocks, the people that I've been listening to over the years, a lot of the people who inspired me to start this show. I was happy for you. You guys were having a blast. I was super excited because I've been watching the work you all have been doing, and I've been in contact with you all over the past year and a half, as much as I can. With my situation, it's been extremely difficult to get out to a lot of the political events that I'd like to get to, but that doesn't mean I don't pay attention and appreciate what you all are doing, which is why I, want to get you on here tonight to talk about it, which is why I want people to understand how impressive what you all pulled off out there is. I mean, I don't think people can quite grasp right now. I mean, it's essentially like, you know, you can apply it. Let's just, for anybody listening, what Donald Trump said he was going to do, the Mises Caucus did to the Libertarian Party. They went in and they completely drained the swamp. I don't pretend to understand all the infighting. I will mention him because I have had some squabbles with him through Twitter before. Nick Sarwalk, I guess he was the former chair. What a complete effing moron. I don't understand how he was the chair of anything. But I see people like him and the rest of them put up such a piss poor, pathetic fight against a movement that was extremely strong and dedicated. So my hats off.
He tried to start like an actual fight.
I saw the video.
Fortunately,
which one of you all assaulted him? Paul, was it you? Because that was a pretty strong shoulder bump.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Yeah, so thank God that we got a video of it. So during the votes, if the votes were close, like especially for things that needed like 2/3, if it wasn't quite clear that we had a 2/3 majority or not, we would stand up to vote. And we had so at least our section of the room, we had this one guy who would come down and count everybody. And so that guy, he was making his way back up the aisle towards the front of the room, and Nick Sarwark comes like running around, and when you watch the video, he purposely like shoulder checks this guy and then tries to claim that this other guy assaulted him and is like making this big deal about it. He's going to get the police involved, which I'm like, okay, so you're a libertarian, but you're going to like try to get the state involved with whatever.
Well, that's what happens when you're a Fed boy in disguise, essentially.
Yeah. But yeah, so fortunately we had a video of everything, like of that entire scenario before it, led up to that. But yeah, like it was so ridiculous.
Well, the reason I bring that up, and I know a lot of the people listening here, this conversation is a bit esoteric. We're trying to paint the best picture we possibly can to make people understand. And this gentleman was the former chair, so basically the head of the entire party. And, over the past few years has been exposed to be the fraud that he is, to the point to where I think he recently ran for a position in his home state and was beaten by NODA, which is none of
the above.
None of the above, yeah.
Yep.
So he got beat by nobody. That's how pathetic. And that's why these little people here and there, and you'll see them everywhere. Anytime there's any kind of success, these naysayers want to try and bring it all down. So
yeah, this is a guy.
And watching you guys work, super appreciative and super proud. Y'all have done a great job, and to see the Libertarian Party now under the leadership of people willing to say the things that need to be said and willing to put their necks out there and willing to stand up. Kudos. I mean, it's refreshing.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is not the end. It is just the beginning. So come check it out. Come join up. There's still plenty of room. And there's still some stuff to do. And speaking of stuff to do, we got the Libertarian Party of Virginia is having a convention on August 20th down in Roanoke.
My birthday, everybody. We'll see you there.
Come talk about more parliamentary procedure on your birthday.
I can't wait. And hopefully that night too, for everybody that will be in town. And hopefully I've been talking to, reached out to the people up at Chaos. That's the place. And Andrew, you've been up there before. Such a good time. And Andrew could probably speak to this as well, which is kind of goes into my whole philosophy and why I enjoy all this. Is Andrew's been up there to Chaos enough in the 4th of July party. Callaway, Virginia, this area is probably the most libertarian place on the planet, doesn't even know it. It's pure freedom every time. And I think everybody will have a blast. Show up there. You'll be around the greatest bunch of people that you could possibly be in a room with. To hell with, some cocktail bar in Manhattan with a bunch of Wall Street, yuppies talking about how much they traded today. You're talking about people that can do anything and everything that involves survival, sitting up on that mountain drinking beer, having a good time. So August 20th will be a hell of a time for everybody listening to this show, and especially the LP people, because as Paul said, they're going to be in Roanoke. Do you know where they're going to be at? Is it the higher education?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's the Roanoke Higher Education Center. It's downtown.
And for anybody that's listening, what exactly, Paul? Go ahead and continue what was going on that day with the procedures.
Oh, it's that the business is not going to be all that fun. It's basically just the state has governing documents, call it the Constitution. It's pretty outdated and needs some work. So the idea behind this convention is to put through some amendments to it to sort of bring it up to more modern standards, hopefully. So without getting too boring, that's what it is. But the draw is not the event during the day. It's definitely the stuff in the evening that you're talking about.
Well, no,
and also just to talk and meet some cool people.
Well, the draw is both. If you listen to this show and you're like us, and I know a lot of people that listen to us are trying to figure out ways to become a little bit more involved. Hey, show up. Make your voice be heard. This is the Libertarian Party, especially now, and especially the LP that people in this podcast are going to be a part of. Show up, make your voice be heard. We want to hear what people have to say. Get active.
For the Roanoke area out here, like we actually have meetings once a month. It's the second Wednesday of every month at Corn Beef and Co. Downtown Roanoke.
I wish they'd move it to Monday.
At about 7:00. What's that?
I wish they'd move that to Mondays. Mondays or Fridays. I could probably make it more.
Yeah, it's the middle of the week. Like I'd prefer it to be, honestly, a weekend would be great. Well, I guess not anymore because now I'm busy every weekend doing weddings and whatnot. But yeah, second Wednesday of every month, we meet at Corned Beef at about 7:00 at night.
Yeah, so start getting involved. Just start for anything, just to meet different people and kind of find out what their opinions may be. Maybe figure out some things you might have not thought about to take back to your local communities, because it all starts out locally, and that kind of leads me to everything that I wanted this podcast to be about. We've kind of went over some of the things that to try and paint you a picture of where we're all coming from. And now we kind of want to paint a picture of where we're trying to go forward, because Appalachia, it's my home. It is, in my opinion, the greatest place on the planet to live at. The people are fantastic. You can survive through anything, harsh winters, hot summers. People know how to fish, hunt, grow. They basically know how to survive. And they're some of the strongest people on the planet. And in my opinion, they are the key. The Appalachian region is the key to moving forward in this country, I think, because we are so resilient and tough. And I think this is an opportunity for us to kind of start leading the way. So for you gentlemen who are all heavily invested, not only in the Mises Caucus and Libertarian Party and national, but the local reach, the local politics of it, what do you all think is something we have to look forward to for Appalachia in the future through all this? Like, what are some of your goals? I also want to get to the Appalachian Freedom Institute as well, but what do you think the most important thing about all this for Appalachia is?
Well,
So honestly,
to me, the foundation of making a change for the better in this place, and getting back to our roots, because you alluded to it before with like the coal mine wars, stuff like that. We are very culturally independent people, but the state has sort of stripped us of that, and the northeastern corporations, the Purdue's, stuff like that.
Yeah, let's talk about
But
the Sackler family, what they did to Appalachia.
Oh, it's and they couldn't have done it without Joe Manchin's of the world to come in and I can get selling a product and then looking back and thinking, man, we screwed up there. But they knew what they were doing the whole time. I mean, there's internal documents that hey, we're going to go get these coal miners and we're going to get them hooked on this stuff and we're going to make millions. I mean, that's paraphrasing it, but that's more or less what they said.
Well, it's no different than the crack epidemic back in the 80s. They were flooding crack into black neighborhoods, and the reason being is they want the most rebellious people in this country, the most FU people in this country, to be sedated and out of whack and things to that degree. I mean, it's a perfect correlation.
Oh yeah, 100%. But I think, and West Virginia specifically has taken a pretty good step towards the start of turning the tide, and that is, to me, it's school choice. My number one issue would be in the drug war, but school choice is going to start this generation. These people are going to be able to get, people like us are going to be able to get their kids out of these government indoctrination centers and actually educate them on skills and how the real world works. And, that's something, and I know a lot of people want the quick fix on, what can we do that'll make us, set us free tomorrow? Well, I mean, there's things you can do in your own life, but it's going to be a long game. We have to start. That's the way the left and the progressives started, back in the late 1800s, the Teddy Roosevelt era. And they started infiltrating these institutions and a tweak here and a right person to put this policy in place there, and look where they are now. So you're not going to undo that in a year or a presidential cycle or a decade. It's going to take a long time. And I think school choice, allowing people to homeschool their kids easier, take them to private schools, take them to religious schools or charter schools, what have you. I think that is a very good first step in turning this thing around. Education is key. The next generation is key.
Well, of course, as libertarians, we have to, obligatory say taxation is theft, and I'm completely against the idea of taxation. That being said, I'm also a realist and understand that taxes are going to be taken. So for each student, as you're talking about school choice, for those that don't know, school choice is basically having that money follow the child. So if every child in the state of Virginia, say, gets $20,000 that is funded towards him per student, well, now that money goes to the family. So a mother might decide, well, maybe, I'll quit my job now because I have this $20,000 to sit around here. Now we can homeschool our kid. And during that homeschool process, now we can go outside, maybe grow more of our own food because we've got the time to do it. Maybe raise our own chickens and things like that. You open up more opportunities for the family unit to become a whole again. Or you might say, well, you know what? I just want to send my kid down the road a mile to a pod that is being taught by a teacher that I've chosen that's going to teach them the things that I want to choose. So it's not just a taxation issue. It's also a cultural thing where you can have your children being taught by the people that you choose. And you're also, once you take away the money directly going to the public schools, what people don't think about as well is now you start seeing a reduction in these schools, and some of these schools have to close down. Well, now that's more taxpayer dollars that don't have to be spent on maintenance, on, keeping the lights on food, on salaries, on pensions, all these things start going down, and you start saving more and more taxpayer dollars. So, taxation is theft, but I would be willing to make, that's somewhere I'd be willing to meet in the middle is school choice. I think it's fantastic.
Absolutely. So that's a big one for me as well. And I know that's something that Governor Youngkin campaigned on. So I'm hoping, I don't have a lot of faith, but I'm hoping that's something that he actually follows through with. And then I had recently, just the past few months, I saw where Nick Freitas had introduced some legislation to abolish the ABC here in have ABCs up there. You can go buy liquor at Walmart. Like it's not a thing. Like, why does the government have this monopoly on alcohol? It's absurd. So that's something I would love to see go through. And then also, like, when I moved here, Virginia is the only state I've ever lived in where I had to pay property taxes for my car. Like, that's not a thing when I lived in like Michigan or even Minnesota. Like, why am I paying rent to the government for my car? And just property taxes in general, I think is like one of, if not the worst form of taxation. I mean, you can pay off your house entirely, but if you don't pay your property taxes on it, they can still come and take it, even though it's yours.
Yeah, and not to mention, they also decide the value of your house and how much you're going to pay in property taxes. They make that distinction as well.
Yep.
So, Paul, how about you? What's your focus on Appalachia?
Well, I don't think you can top the school choice stuff. It's the world is run by ideas, and the best and ultimately only way to fight bad ideas is with good ideas. And anything that you can do personally or politically to allow your kids or your neighbors' kids or whoever to expose them to better ideas it's going to definitely end up in a good thing. It might not end up in something good overnight, but 10, 20, 30 years from now, that's going to pay dividends more than anything else. Beyond that, I think probably gun rights. That's probably a big thing. I mean, you'll have that recent episode on that one, so maybe we don't need to go too deep on that. But like, it's not really a thought that anybody wants. It's not really anything that anybody seeks out, but it is sort of like, with that being out there, there's a line. It's like, you can't cross it. I know you can't cross it. I know all that stuff. So there's a reason why you had what you had in Australia. There's a reason why you had what you had in China,
Canada,
like in Canada. These are places where ultimately the citizens have to go and beg and, please, sir, may I have my freedom back? There's no sort of break in case of glass kind of thing. And with that getting chipped away, like, I think that's a very important thing. And that's a very doable thing at a local level as well. So, I mean, you saw it back in 2020 when, now I'm sure that all of these whatever sanctuary resolutions could have been reworded and restructured to be a whole lot more effective. I'm sure that Michael Bolden at the 10th Amendment Center would have a lot to say about that. But I mean, we saw it. We lived it with all of these sanctuary counties, sanctuary cities for gun rights back in January, February 2020. Everybody forgets about that because that was the biggest news story in the world until it wasn't.
Well, and the thing about that is it was a breath of fresh air to finally see people start using this mentally ill progressive logic against them, and that's been the biggest thing is people for so long have been scared to say anything because there's a vocal minority on freaking Twitter and Facebook and that somehow make all the rules for everybody because they make the most noise, when in reality probably 70% to 80% of the country, whether they be right or left, completely disagrees with these lunatics who just talk themselves in circles. And so they do the whole sanctuary city thing for immigrants, and they pat themselves on the back for being so progressive and wonderful, and then next thing you know, rural Appalachian counties and towns are starting to say, well, I guess we'll be a sanctuary gun county, and they start losing their ever-loving minds. And it just points out the hypocrisy, and once again, why it's so important for us to continue the narrative as we're doing to remind people of the lunacy behind it.
Well, I mean, good strategy is good strategy. Anytime that you can take your local government and pull power away from these larger, higher level, more distant, less under your control governments, and you can pull it down to your county, to your city, to your town, that's going to be a good thing. Even if then that city or town does something you don't like, it's a lot easier to go and talk to your mayor than it is to go and talk to your president or to your governor.
And your mayor also understands that you also know where he lives. And you also know where these town council members and these board, because you go to church with them, your kids go to school with them, they're held much more accountable in these rural areas, which then again, it's probably the opposite in somewhere like Loudoun County, which just recently had a lot of issues with their school board and stuff. I mean, it's such a big county with so many people. It's easy to get lost and mixed up and all that kind of stuff, but rural areas, not so much. We play by different rules. We play a different game around here. People are more polite. People respect each other and their opinions a whole lot more. And, which is a big reason why, once again, what everything you guys are doing is so important, because we're not all the same. We shouldn't be governed like California, nor should New York be governed like Texas, nor should Arizona be governed like North Carolina. We all have different cultural values and cultural beliefs, and we can all abide by those and still find a way to, interact and practice commerce and trading and things like that. We don't need a big centralized government, shitting everything down our throats, trying to tell us how to live. Decentralize it as much as possible. And by getting out there to these local things, you can start stopping things as simple as a stupid ass car tax. That is, Andrew, that's completely absurd. You know what I mean? It's completely absurd. We got to continue to pay property tax on cars and land. It's completely absurd that my buddy Amos has to get a separate license to be able to do construction work in Rocky Mount as he does Franklin County. It's the same damn. I mean, they regulate us to death between the regulations and then think about the man hours we have to spend, and these contractors have to spend filing this paperwork, going and getting these. I mean, those man hours, it's just as much robbery as the taxes are. But you can change those things on a local level, right?
Absolutely. And that kind of, reminds me of like just occupational licensing in general. Like, why do I care? If like my barber has gone to some school for so many hours, whatever, like, can you cut my hair? Do I look like an idiot or not? Like,
hey, and you know what? There's this crazy thing called the internet where you can go write reviews and leave reviews. And I guarantee if you went to that, I guarantee you, if there's a barbershop that's open and I got a storefront, you can probably go find a review. And all it's going to take is one person to say, man, this dude don't know what he's doing. Y'all better steer clear. And his business is going down. That is true capitalism. I know this episode didn't air. We had technical difficulties. We're going to go back to it and talk about it. But the gentleman we had on here a couple of weeks ago, with the Black Lives Matter, I kind of said, my thoughts on the whole civil rights, thing is, well, maybe it worked at the time, and it probably did, and it probably was necessary to rip the Band-Aid off, but every law should have a sunset clause. And I think if you think about it now, I would prefer people to discriminate. I'd prefer to know what your thoughts are. If you want to put up a sign on your door that says no black people allowed, I know not to go to your restaurant. But as it stands, the government forces you to accommodate everybody. And, on the surface, it looks good. But now, if you're a black individual and you go into this restaurant and the dude's a Klan member and don't want you in there, well, the government forces him to. But you know what? The government ain't got a camera on him in the back room. He's spitting in your food or doing, you know what I mean? Like, I would prefer these people expose themselves. I don't need the government to protect me, from all this stuff. Let the market work itself out.
Absolutely.
I'm sure everybody's gone out to eat, and that restaurant that you've gone to, when was the last time that you looked at their inspections and their licenses? I would bet for anybody who's not an inspector working for the government, the answer is never. And how was the last time that you went and looked at their Yelp reviews? All the time.
Yeah.
Which of these things is really driving your decision?
Yeah,
because that would absolutely be the case even without occupational licensing. The thing is, those people who run those businesses, say somebody wants to open up a barbershop and hire a bunch of barbers, you can still, have whatever tests or, whatever goes on, to make sure that you're hiring people who know what they're doing. There may or may not be some certifications that exist. I know there are in the IT world. So if you wanted to go open up, say work for some computer repair shop, they might want you to have some certifications or something to show that you know what you're doing, without having some government mandated license. And a lot of people will mention, well, what about healthcare? And honestly, same thing. Say you want to go work at a hospital and be a doctor. Well, the people hiring you will probably say, hey, we want you to have this degree, and to show that you know what you're doing. You don't need to have some special license from the government.
Yeah, essentially the market will take care of itself in a free market if the free market were allowed to persist.
Right.
If it isn't, which gives, all these mouth breathers out here a reason to argue against it because they can't differentiate between capitalism and cronyism. So, that's it's a big reason why we're here. It's a big reason why we're having these conversations.
Well, and even beyond that, the people who are benefiting from this system are the people who've already gone in and done all this nonsense work and studied for 1,800 hours to be a barber. They're getting the benefit of other people not being able to compete with them. So who's losing out, though? It is the poor person. It's the person who can't afford to spend 6 months, a year in barber training, which, no offense to barbers, but I don't think you need 1,800 hours to cut hair when you probably only need about 400 hours to fly a plane. This doesn't make sense. So this whole thing is a racket to protect the interests of the people who have already done all this stuff from all the people who would be looking to make a better life for themselves, but now they can't because there's all these artificial barriers put in place to benefit the people who have already who are already making good money.
Oh, great example. Same thing. I was reading an article not too long ago about a gentleman down in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And I might have alluded to this on another show before, but, essentially he was an Indian doctor and he wanted to purchase an MRI machine to be able to give patients an MRI at a very reasonable cost. You know what I mean? Once you purchase the equipment after it's paid for, you don't need to be charging people $1,200, $1,300. Essentially, so once he made the purchase, the North Carolina Health Board or whatever came down on him and basically said he couldn't do it. And it all boiled down to the fact that the North Carolina board was all positions were held by people who were in major hospitals in the North. Because, North Carolina, for anybody, Wake Forest, Duke Medical, UNC Medical, it's a massive medical state when it comes to things like that. And the guy just wanted to offer cheap MRIs, and they brought the wrath of the state down on him because the heads of these hospitals were also on the boards of the North Carolina Health. That's just another just another minor government intrusion that you don't even think about that screws you as a normal citizen. You don't even think about, because you could go get that MRI for a reasonable price by a professional, and instead the government tells you you got to go use this hospital and pay out your ass, and maybe have to work 20 hours more overtime the next 2 months instead of spending that time with your family. So perfect example. Great example.
Well,
the medical industry is so far gone. Like what you're talking about is a certificate of need law, which basically the people that you're going to compete against decide whether you need this piece of equipment or not. And that, that goes for all sorts of imaging and ORs and stuff. So even if I were to raise the money and hire a doctor and a bunch of nurses, I couldn't start my own clinic because I would have to be granted, like the people that I would be competing against would say, oh, well, clearly they don't need that there. And it's just, it's another barrier that will make the healthcare industry probably the second hardest industry to destate than anything else. Like the only one that would be harder, I think, would be banking, and then healthcare is right after that. It is a mess.
Oh, military industrial complex right up there, but they're scot-free on all their stuff. They don't have liability the way that the medical industry does. They got to dance around all that nonsense. You're absolutely right. Well, Great point.
To bring it back to Appalachia specifically, and I guess rural areas in general, just the certificate of need law is going to hurt y'all a lot more than somebody in like the suburbs or a city, because the mechanism, you got to go ask your competitors for permission to effectively open up your hospital or clinic or something. And if you're in the city or the suburbs, it's like the impact of that's going to be like, all right, we do not get to go from 8 clinics to 9. Like that's going to hurt your prices a little bit. That's going to hurt your competition a little bit, but you still have 8 clinics. It's not like you got to drive 2 hours to the nearest hospital because you're out in the middle of nowhere and you're being told, oh yeah, we want to build this hospital, but we can't. So you're stuck with 0 hospitals. The difference between 0 and 1 hospitals is way more than the difference between 8 and 9 hospitals.
Yep. And it's near and dear to me because I work in the healthcare industry, but there's some of these small communities like out in the southern part of West Virginia and like southwestern Virginia, where like if you need to go to the hospital or you need to go get a CT scan or an MRI, you've got to drive a couple of hours because the closest place that offers that is somewhere like Tazewell or Princeton or Beckley or Charleston.
My in-laws live in Tazewell County down in Richlands, and the majority of the time that they have to go see a specialist or a doctor or anything, they're going all the way to Kingsport, Tennessee. I mean, that's almost an hour and a half, 2-hour drive for them. So
that's crazy.
Right. Yeah.
Because Clinch Valley's right there, but there's so many.
Oh, Clinch Valley's horrible too. They've got a horrible track record.
Yeah, well, there's so many services they can't offer because they're not allowed. You know what I mean? Because the people that run, the University Hospital in Blacksburg or something like that, we're like, well, we probably don't want people to be able to go to Clinch Valley and get this particular procedure because then they'll have to come to us and we'll make more money. I mean, I don't know. It's a mess. Like I said, it's one of the biggest messes in the country.
Yeah. And it's absurd that, with the technology we have these days and the quick transport and everything, that you can't get all that you need. You know what I mean? And it's been like that forever. I mean, anytime here in our area, anybody ever has a major issue, you're always hearing about them going to or Charlottesville or Wake Forest or Duke. And I hear recently, Roanoke has become much more of and Andrew, you can speak on this. I mean, it's becoming like a healthcare center mecca. My wife is involved in it. RU Carilion, Virginia Tech Carilion. I mean, it's becoming, the medical industry has replaced, the railroad here in Roanoke as the major industry. But still, though, it's just, as Matt alluded to, it's ridiculous even to be in rural communities like Richlands. Richlands still has a healthy enough community where you should be able to service each and every medical issue that you have. Matt, that's a perfect example. All the rural Southwest Virginia and Southern West Virginia communities, they should not have to travel that far with the technology we have in 2022.
Well, like somebody in Welch, West Virginia, which is right there on that border.
Yeah.
Since Bluefield Regional shut down, which, there's still an ER there, but the hospital itself is gone now. If someone wants real quality health care, they're either going to have to drive to Princeton or Pikeville, Kentucky, or Kingsport, Tennessee, like you say. And there used to be the Welch Hospital there, but it's 10 beds. They don't have any imaging equipment. They don't have any diagnostic equipment. It's like an old country doctor doing a house call, basically. And you can't convince me that there's not somebody in that community that's looked and said, man, if I put a good clinic here, I could make some real money. But they're just not allowed to do it.
Yep. Like, it was a couple of months ago. I had to go to the ER myself. I had what it ended up being. I had some fluid outside of my lung that just made it really painful to breathe. And so we were over at my in-laws' house out in Giles County, and we got in the car and we drove over to Blacksburg to go to the hospital over there by Virginia Tech, just because it, like my wife knew that I was going to get better service there. And yeah, we were in the waiting room in the ER for not even 2 minutes before we got called back. Everybody there was doing their best to take care of me and everything. Definitely the best experience that I've had in the hospital. I mean, we purposely drove a half an hour away, even though there was a clinic that was closer, just because we knew that we weren't going to get the service, like the level of service that I needed.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the things that when you really start breaking down things, you start thinking about, well, when you decentralize things, not only the government, even when you do it to the medical industry, you can have, little clinics in your own neighborhood, in your own little zip code. You don't need these massive hospitals anymore. It's such an outdated thing. And it's a big part of the VA as well. And as a veteran, I know so many veterans rely on the VA and they use it. And to be honest, it is such it's in such disarray, and it's such a bad, it's a gleaming example of why socialized healthcare shouldn't exist. But with the way we're able to transport people these days, and with the internet and quickness of things like that, you don't need, I'm a proponent of completely disbanding the VA for the same reason I am on the public schools, is you get rid of it and you just give that veterans a card that says they can use this card anywhere and the government will reimburse them. You take away salaries for doctors, you take away pensions, the VA in Salem, think about the cost it takes just to run that place. And everybody's like, well, what about these jobs? Well, if you're a good enough nurse or a good enough doctor at the VA, if the VA closes down and we can have a free market, you go out there and start your own business and you'll either succeed or you won't. Like the teachers that make the biggest stink about, student choice are the ones who are probably crappy teachers and won't survive unless the government's there to prop them up. Same with the VA. Look, if you're a good enough nurse or good enough doctor, you'll be all right. Your patients will find you and your private practice will work. So, it's, just simple things like that once again.
Yeah, I'd gone to the VA a few months ago. and my appointment had gotten canceled and rescheduled at least 3 times. And so I actually get there, and I needed to get my medications because I've got high blood pressure and cholesterol and stuff. So I needed to get some medications because I only had like a couple of weeks left, and they had rescheduled my appointment for like 2 months later. And I was like, well, I don't have enough to last. And I couldn't get it refilled because I was in the last one. So I needed to go actually physically get seen by a doctor to get my medicine refilled. So I went in there, talked to the guy at the pharmacy window, and he said I needed to go over to like the quick care clinic that was right next to it. So I went in there and checked in with this lady, and then sat down, and I was sitting there for 2 hours. Some lady there at the VA actually called me on my phone to ask me like if when I could come in or something. I was like, well, actually, I'm here now. I've been waiting here for 2 hours because the lady that I talked to didn't actually check me into their system, so they didn't even know that I was there waiting. Like, you're supposed to be in and out in like 15 minutes, but I've been sitting there for 2 hours.
Yeah, you got to start bitching immediately. You got to just go up and like, look, I've been here 30 minutes, so you got to make a scene.
Yeah.
So you sat there for 2 hours, and they finally saw you?
Yeah. So then when they called and I told them that I'd been sitting there, so then they did actually send a person. They came out and took me back into the room, and we chatted for a bit, and they got my prescriptions refilled and everything. But they said that normally, you're only supposed to be waiting there about 15 minutes. But just the person at the front desk that I spoke to never actually bothered to check me in.
Well, I mean, that's government healthcare at its finest, and that's a whole nother episode just talking about the failures of the healthcare system over the past couple of years. And as Matt alluded to as well, I mean, it goes back way further than that, especially in the Appalachian region. I purposely think they crap on us simply because we're the most rebellious. And to get to all that, we're getting ready to get out of here. I don't want to keep y'all boys too much longer. I've kept you long enough, but I did want to talk about the Appalachian Liberty Institute. Something that you gentlemen, contacted me about here a few weeks ago, which has allowed me to kind of get to know you boys a little bit more, but, kind of explain to them, Matt, I guess this is your baby. So you and Paul kind of just explain to what this whole deal is.
So I'm a lifelong resident of Appalachia. I was born in Huntington. I've lived most of my life here in Lincoln County, West Virginia, and I've tried to leave a few times, but I just love this place. I feel like I'm a part of it. It's a part of me, and I don't feel right when I'm anywhere else. So I look back at our history, and the people that settled this part of the country were people who just said, I'm not going to do your thing. We do our own thing. We live our own way. And I think we have gotten away from that, especially since like the last half of the 19th century. And now a lot of our people are either slaves to the government or some kind of substance. And I think a lot of that is by design. So
yeah, they're very docile.
What I want to do is to do my part in reawakening that independent spirit. So, and I've tried to do that a couple of different ways, getting involved with the Mises Caucus, the LP. And I think to reach out to people across a broad spectrum, because you've got a lot of really good, what we call liberty Republicans in the state. I needed to find some way that was that didn't have those political labels attached to it. And I looked at people like Scott Horton with the Libertarian Institute, his reach, and the Mises Institute, all the good work they do, and all these little think tanks and websites and blogs and organizations across the country. And I thought, well, why don't we have one? If anybody could use something like that to teach, to gather the liberty-minded people together and give each other resources, it would be this one. So I reached out to Paul, and I shot the idea by him, and he was on board. And we reach out to you, But I think my vision for it, at least starting off, is sort of just like a website or a blog where people can, like local people can write liberty oriented papers, submit it, and get published through our website. And once that takes off, if it does, then we can move on to like live events and conferences, and maybe get some of the bigger names in here to teach classes, give people the tools to take this place that I love with everything inside of me, these people, and give them the tools to take back their lives from Washington, D.C. and Charleston.
Paul?
I don't know. This is kind of Matt's thing. I'm
because I mean, yeah, we do have other big institutes. I mean, about like the Mises Institute and stuff. So I think it'd be great to have something that that's local here to Appalachia. Yeah, so I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, and I told Paul on that first time that I talked to him about it, I said, hey, if this causes, 2 teenage kids to read Human Action 10 years from now, then it was all a worthy endeavor, in my opinion. So any positive change that can come from it. But I just want to at least give it a shot. I've got kids, and I at least have to try. So maybe it goes somewhere, maybe it doesn't. I'm learning how to build a website as we speak, so we'll see how that goes.
Well,
but I'm excited.
I'll say if you need some help, let me know. I've made a few.
Yes, I absolutely need help.
I can't call myself a professional yet because I've never been paid, but I am an amateur website designer.
I hear you. I'm absolutely like a monkey looking at a football, man, when it comes to this stuff.
You and good company, man. That's me too. I want to get Andrew down here to help me a little bit with our website too. I like to add a few things to it as well, and what you guys are doing, and with I'm like you, man. I mean, I grew up in Appalachia, and I know the stories. It's been ingrained in my system, and the rebellious nature of the Appalachian region. And if you go back and listen to even our episodes, my military episodes, the last one we did with him at Bird and Casey Brandon, our unit going to Iraq. I mean, we were the most rogue, rebellious unit, bunch of Appalachian boys. I mean, it's ingrained in our DNA. And I think we have the strongest mindset in the world amongst our people. And we need to break them away, like Matt said, from, the government indoctrination, essentially. And then all the drugs and things that are just destabilizing our region, which is, as you alluded to, I mean, it's intentional, but we got to get people away from those sort of things. And when you all came to me and asked me to be a part of this, I told my wife, I said, man, this is huge. I said, let's take the next step here. I think the foundation has been laid for you gentlemen. And, I think it's up to us to be able to take the next step, as far as representing the Libertarian Party and the Mises Caucus and just Appalachian Americans in general. I mean, we're here. I mean, you're, Dave Smiths and Michael Heisses and Tom Woods and Eric Julys and Scott Horton's there in different parts of the country. I mean, Appalachian is ours. This is our responsibility at this point in time.
Oh, 100%. And Mike is a big inspiration behind me actually putting this in motion. I consider Mike Heiss, as I'm talking about, I consider him a friend, and I really admire that dude. And before that I met him, I probably just would have had the idea and thought, man, it'd be cool if somebody started that. But now being around him and the Mises Caucus and all the rest of these guys, Paul, Andrew, and all the other Andrews down in Virginia, when it comes to the liberty movement, no matter how you want to get involved in it, if you're sitting there and you're looking on the internet and you're thinking, man, now I wonder where all the Liberty events are, and I wonder who's going to put these Liberty events together for my local area. Well, that's probably you, brother. I mean, this is the ground floor. You got to, like, instead of saying, well, I wish somebody else would do this, you are that somebody else to someone else, if that makes sense. So that has been, Mike has been a real inspiration in saying, you know what, instead of saying, man, it'd be nice if there was this, I'm going to try to do it. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but I tried.
Well, I agree with that. I'm a big fan of what he's done, of what he's accomplished, and what he's continuing to accomplish. And, Andrew, you can kind of speak to this before we get out of here. The party last weekend you got to attend. I mean, that's something that I want to bring more and more to this area. Maybe there, maybe not. But, I mean, if you can imagine a day like that where you can bring Dave Smith down to do a comedy show before they play music, and then they do a fireworks show, and having, a tent set up, just allowing people to understand, hey, these are the kind of people that are trying to change your lives for the better. I think we have a huge, vastly enormous opportunity ahead of us. And I hope
absolutely. Because like when I pulled in, when I finally got there, because Google Maps didn't have a clue where I was trying to go. But when I finally made it there and pulled up to the house and everything and just saw the number of cars there, I was like, man, it seemed like half of Franklin County was up there. So yeah, there's so much potential.
Yeah, I mean, Appalachia, as I've always stated, is the most libertarian region in the country that doesn't know they're libertarians. And it's simply because they don't really care about politics enough. And rightfully so, because they're in their hollers and they're on their farms. And for the most part, as long as things are going nicely, they don't really care. They're just trying to live their lives, have their fun, work hard during the day, party at night. But here recently, due to the politics, they've really brought that out of us. They brought our contempt. They brought our, they tried to weaponize our own goodness against us. And now it's just people are ready. People have yearned for an opportunity to speak out. And, you've got a chance to see that, coming over and hanging out with us here in Franklin County and some of these Appalachian areas. I mean, people are just, they're fed up. And they're salivating for the opportunity to fight back. That's the thing we can all take away from MAGA. Donald Trump. It wasn't necessarily the fact that who Trump was or what he did or anything, or whether he used to be a Democrat or not. It was the fact that Donald Trump would punch back. And all those people out there who want to punch back might not necessarily like Donald Trump, but God bless it, they're going to like the fucking libertarians because we're going to punch back,
Yep.
And in a way that actually works.
Yeah. Go ahead, Matt.
So,
go ahead, Paul.
So this is sort of getting into the other parts of the Mises Caucus strategy beyond just taking over the LP. It's getting into what they're calling issue coalitions. So basically, what's a libertarian item? No matter where you're at in the country, there's some kind of whatever the political bent of that area is, there's something there that you can push to make them more libertarian. So if you're in a very red county, push gun rights sanctuaries. If you're in a very blue county or a very blue town or city or whatever, push marijuana decriminalization or psychedelic decriminalization or whatever you can get. But just like moving the ball incrementally towards a society where less people are in jail for stuff that didn't hurt anybody. So that's option number one. And then the second one is getting into local government positions and doing what's called nullification. And so what that basically is you get into these positions because this is the area where the Libertarian Party will actually win, is like the town councils, the school boards, the county boards, that sort of thing. So libertarians win these positions, and they win them more than you think. This happens. This can happen, and it can happen more. So you get people into these positions, and they're just going to say, we're not doing this. We're not enforcing this. We're not going to send our police officers after this or that drug. We're not going to send them after this or that gun. We're not going to send them after whatever rule, whatever regulation. We're not enforcing it. So you're bringing that little bit more freedom back to people's lives. And you do that enough, and it starts making a difference.
Yeah, once they get that little taste of freedom, then they want a little bit more, then a little bit more. Then they realize, well, dang, I'm getting effed over at every turn of my life. Let's start finding ways to fight against all that, you know?
Yeah, and that's the thing, because you're never going to fix what's wrong with anywhere by if you keep pursuing the same things that got you there. If you're with what you're doing is like, we're going to take over the government and we're going to build it the right way, and we're going to do the right thing. It's like, that's what the people who got you into this situation did. And they were wrong. Like, it's highly likely that you're going to be wrong too. Just most people are wrong about most things most times. But that's the beauty of something like competition, is that 99% of people are wrong, and the 1% of person who's right is the one who gets all the business. Now, what's the chances that 1% of the person is going to be in government? Basically zero.
Yes. 100%. Matt, what were you going to say?
I basically piggyback on what Paul said, and it's all about these small wins in your local community and just doing incremental changes that you can make someone's life more free. And like you said, the more people recognize it, they're going to say, well, man, I like that little bit of freedom. Let's get a little bit more. And then eventually, you know, over a long period of time, you're more or less where you want to be. But instead of thinking about presidential elections and winning, you know, the Senate race, let's think about winning, you know, your school board race or your town council race. That's where you're going to make the difference.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And my co-host and I have, spoke on this many times before, and we've discussed this. And, you know, when we talk about our reach and whatnot, and they always ask me, you know, I'm not here to, I don't want to change anybody's mind. I'm not here to convince anybody. I don't want to convince you of anything. All I want to do is get you out of your own damn way so you can make the best decision for yourself. And 95% of the time, when you get to that point, the best decision for yourself is also going to be the best decision for your neighbor. And if your neighbor has the same mindset, his neighbor and their neighbor, and it extends on out, and we can have a very liberty-minded civilization. You know, as an anarchist, I'm not at all opposed to a minarchist society where we do have a very limited government that is here to handle a few things here and there. But we can handle things individually, and we can do things without regulation. We don't need, like as Paul said, we don't, you know, we have Yelp. If you can decide on what restaurant you want to go to, you can decide on which doctor you want to visit or which dentist you want to go to, but the market will take care of itself. And by influencing your local politics and your local elections and get out there and speak into your community, you know, I've found even for us, that's the best thing to do. You know, we can have one of the biggest names, we've had on this podcast, and, you know, they might not get a ton of downloads. And then we have a guy that's on from down the street, and everybody around here wants to listen to it. It's because people invest in their communities more than people realize. And that's why you gentlemen are here, is to help those gentlemen or help those people realize, help them get out of their own damn way. And even if they don't decide to join the party or decide to get in politics, at least by them getting out of their own way, and being able to make decisions for themselves, you have a formidable ally. And what's wrong with that? I would much rather, ally with somebody who's got 80% of my values and morals and beliefs than I would with somebody with 20. That's why I don't get the big deal about libertarians losing their minds about, working with the right, like the Republican Liberty people. I think that's great. Great. We have people like Thomas Massey and Rand Paul and who's the gentleman? Is it who's the gentleman Dave Smith had on his show within the last year that they had a debate with, and the best debate he had because they were civil about it. He's a Republican, maybe in New Hampshire. That
Eric Bracco.
Bracco, yes, phenomenal.
Yeah,
that was a great debate. Both made fantastic points on both sides that anybody could take, positive feedback from and apply it to our everyday lives. So, well, I've kept you all gentlemen long enough. Thank y'all so much for coming on here today. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk about things like this and have some people kind of get interested and involved. And, as Matt said, if it only reaches 5 people or 10 people or changes 20 people's minds, those 20 people might change 20 people's minds. So, any of y'all have any final thoughts? I'll let y'all go around and say anything else y'all want to say before you get out of here. Maybe we missed or you wanted to shout out.
For me,
with you.
Yeah, I would just just reiterate. If you're interested in all in liberty, you don't have to be a member of the Libertarian Party to come out to our monthly meetings. They're not really business meetings. We just sit and talk, over dinner. Definitely I would, encourage anybody who's interested at all, come out and join us. Like I said earlier, second Wednesday of every month, 7 p.m. at Corned Beef in downtown Roanoke.
Paul?
I would just say if you are liking what you're hearing, if you think that this is a better plan than getting real mad about who the next president is, regardless of what side you're on, then go check out takehumanaction.com and get involved with the Mises Caucus.
Matt?
Yeah, that Paul stole that from me, but go to takehumanaction.com if you're interested, or if you want to get involved locally and you want somebody to point you in the right direction, you can find the West Virginia Mises Caucus page on Twitter and shoot me a DM or shoot me a message or a friend request on Facebook. It's Matthew Lucas. I'm not hard to find, so just reach out to me and I will help get you pointed in the right direction at the very least.
Paul, for signups, if you want to become a member, join the LP, donate to Libertarian Party Mises Caucus in your state. How do you do that?
So the website for LPVA is lpvirginia.org. If you want to go and join, lpvirginia.org/membership, that'll take you right to the join page. And if you go to lp.org, that's the national party, that the join link's very prominent on there. But go get involved, help us out. All we're trying to do is save the world.
Yeah, and if you go to the national LP website, most states, the national website will link you to your state party website as well. So you don't have to remember a bunch of URLs if you just want to do it that way.
Yeah, $50, and I think you get for Virginia anyway, 25 for LP National, 25 for Virginia. Right there on the side, it'll link you up. You can join both for $50 a year. So it's very simple.
Yep.
And for anybody listening, look, we appreciate you listening to this show. If you want to get more involved and kind of understand the things we were talking about here, get on your Spotify or Apple Podcasts, search Part of the Problem for Dave Smith, one of the best podcasts, in my opinion, that's out there. I guess Tim Pool, Timcast IRL is the name of that. Scott Horton, Tom Woods, Eric July, even Maj Toure, Hotep Jesus, a bunch of those guys have shows you can get on and listen to. Kind of immerse yourself in the philosophy. Because, from my perspective, I do appreciate the politics of it, and the Mises Caucus is why I got involved. It's the first time I ever donated to a political party, because I do really believe in what they're doing. But more than that is the philosophy of libertarianism. And that's just, even if you don't get involved in politics, just make your own decisions, speak out, have your voice be heard, and support your individual rights. Do what you want to do, as long as you're not affecting anybody else or stepping on anybody else's toes. Do what you want, enjoy your life, and preach that philosophy to other people. That's the best advice I can give. And enjoy yourself, and get out and talk to your neighbors, and realize that no matter if they're, black, white, Christian, Muslim, gay, straight, most of them are pretty cool. And you can drink a beer and barbecue whatever on a Sunday and have a good time with them, politics aside. So, don't let all this nonsense get you down. What I can say. So, gentlemen, thank you all very, very much for joining me tonight. I really have had an enjoyable time, and I hope we can do it again. Maybe once every 4 or 5 months, to kind of get together. And as soon as the Appalachian Liberty Institute takes off, we start having these published papers, we can come in here and talk about a few things, maybe get more in depth, to things that are affecting the Appalachian region, like the pill epidemic from the Sacklers, the ecstasy. We talk about things like that. Talk about the coal country issues. A lot of things that we can figure out ways to maybe relay this information to our communities. So, thank y'all so very much again for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks
thank
for
you.
coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
All righty. Until the next time, gentlemen, we'll see you.
Sounds good. See you.